So maybe I'll start like this. They did a study at UCLA. It's called a longitudinal study. That means where they study something for a long period of time. They studied couples, married couples, for 20 years, the same couples. And they wanted to see which values were strongly associated with successful marriages. You know, the people who are happily married and stay married, what do they have? Like, is there a common ingredient? And the one thing they found that was the common denominator in all of the couples who stayed married and were happily married was that they valued sacrifice. It wasn't about communication or spending time together or honesty or forgiveness. I mean, I'm sure all those things are important. But the one indicator which had the highest correlation with people who stayed married and who were happily married was that they valued sacrifice. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's a story. It's a parable. Not a real story. It didn't really happen. But the parable goes like this. There was once a man sitting in shul at the rabbi's shiur. The rabbi's giving a class. And he couldn't understand what the rabbi was teaching because he wasn't smart. And he felt so angry and so frustrated. He got up and he walked outside. And he was cursing himself for being so thick-headed. And as he's standing outside of the shul, this mysterious stranger comes walking over to him. Says, "What's wrong?" He says, "What's wrong? I can't understand the class that the rabbi is giving. I'm a Jew and I want to learn Torah and I can't learn." So the mysterious stranger says, "Listen, I have something for you." And he pulls out of his pocket this parchment. And on the parchment is aleph base. He says, "Listen, read the aleph base parchment. And I think you're going to notice that things will change for you. But before I give it to you, I want you to agree to something. I want you to agree that if anyone asks for you to teach them Torah, you will agree." He says, "No one's going to ask me to teach them Torah." The mysterious stranger says, "Nevertheless, I'm saying to you, if and when people ask you to teach them Torah, you need to agree to do it." He says, "I would love for them to ask, Yeah, of course, sure, if anyone asks, yeah." But he says, "Good, here's the parchment." So the guy takes the parchment. It says aleph base, vase, gimel, dalet, hey. He looks, he reads the aleph base like a little kid in cheder. He reads the Hebrew alphabet from the paper, from the parchment. And as he finishes, he realizes now that his mind has become completely clear. And when he comes back into shul and he sits down, he looks inside the sefer, inside the book, and the letters and the words just shoot out of the page, and they go straight into his head, and everything makes perfect sense immediately. Everything the rabbi is saying, it makes perfect sense. In fact, he knows what the rabbi is going to say before the rabbi even says it. and his mind is completely opened now to learning Torah. Okay. Now, around the same time, there was another guy. There was a poor man who was walking around trying to find some menial labor, a job that he could do for the day, where he could earn a few dollars to support his family. And nobody's hiring, and he's starving. I mean, if he doesn't work and get a few dollars, then he doesn't eat today. And he's walking around, he's feeling miserable. And as he's walking around, this mysterious stranger appears and comes over to him and says to him, "Hey, you look upset. What's wrong?" So, "You really want to know what's wrong? I don't have money. I'm going to starve. I'm trying to find someone to hire me to do a job. I can make a few dollars and eat." A mysterious stranger says, "Listen, look at this." He takes out a coin. He says, "I'm going to give you this coin." He says, "But I want you to agree to something. That if people come and ask you for tzedakah, don't ask them how much it is. Just whatever amount it is. If you have it, give it to them. Don't ask them first, well, tell me how much you want. Whatever amount they ask for it, if you have it, just give it to them." So the guy laughs. He says, "If I have it, I don't have anything. I've never had anything. I'm in debt. If I had zero, if my assets would be worth zero, I would consider myself rich. Because not only I've never had anything, I've always been in debt my whole life. So yeah, sure. If people come and ask me for tzedakah, if I have it, give it to them. Sure, but I've never had it." The mysterious stranger says, "Nevertheless, I want you to make that promise, and I'll give you this coin." So he says, "Yes, I make the promise. If I have the funds and someone asks me for tzedakah, I'm going to give it to them, whatever amount it is." He says, "Good, just take this coin." So he takes the coin, and as he takes the coin, all of a sudden someone runs over to him, and they say, "Oh, we need somebody to do a job. Yeah, come quick." So all of a sudden he just got hired. He makes some money from the job. Then as he's leaving the job, somebody's coming over and they're selling some merchandise. And it's just the amount that he just made from the job. He buys the merchandise. Someone comes running over to him and they say, "Oh, we want to buy that merchandise." And then they buy it from him for a profit. And then somebody runs over and says, "Oh, I'm selling some merchandise." And all of a sudden he realizes he just has this golden touch for business. Whatever he buys, he finds sellers. and from that moment, he becomes magnetic with money. Business deals just come to him, and it's always a moneymaker. Okay, story number 3. Around the same exact time, there's a young guy. He's walking along, and he's thinking about how he would really like to start a family, get married. And unfortunately, he never found a fitting prospect, a wife. And he's walking along, he's feeling lonely, and all of a sudden a mysterious stranger appears. And the mysterious stranger says to him, "You look upset, what's wrong?" He says, "Well, I'm lonely. I want to get married." He says, "Well, so get married." He says, "No, I can't find a good wife." So the mysterious stranger says, "I think I have a girl for you. Are you interested?" He says, "Yeah, I'm interested." He says, "Listen, she's like a unknown commodity. People don't really know her because she lives outside of town. Her mother's a widow, and she lives with her mother. But this girl's gold, and she's going to make a great wife. I'm going to tell you where to find her, but before I do, I want you to agree something with me. That whatever your wife tells you to do, you say yes. You don't question. If your wife asks you to do something, you say yes. He says, oh, if I had a wife, I would always do whatever she asks me to do. And the guy says, the mysterious stranger says to the guy, okay, fine. So here's where to find the girl, and he sets up the whole thing. All right. So those are those are the three stories. Remember the three stories? The dumb guy became smart. The poor guy became rich. The single guy became happily married. Okay. 5 years later. 5 years later, the guy who used to not be able to learn is sitting in his own yeshiva, where he is the head of the yeshiva, and he is teaching his class. And he has students who are the most advanced students because he is known, even though he really only started learning 5 years ago, he is known as one of the great geniuses of his region. And he's teaching class. In the middle of the class, a mysterious stranger appears and says, Rebbe, teach me how to read. The scholar says to him, go hire a tutor. I'm not here to teach you how to read. That's for little kids, not adults. This is a high-level class over here for high-level students. And the mysterious stranger says to the teacher again, Rebbe, please teach me how to read. I never went to Hebrew school. Teach me how to read. And the scholar says, I am on a much higher level, and I'm not going to waste my time teaching you how to read. And the mysterious stranger says, well, then I want to remind you that not so long ago, you also were like me, and you also couldn't learn. And you got a parchment with olive base on it, and your life changed. So the guy says, oh, the parchment. I don't need that parchment, that silly parchment. That parchment's a joke. I became a scholar because I'm smart. And the mysterious stranger says, then give me back the parchment. And the guy says, no problem. He had it on him. He always had it on him. He pulls it out and says, take it away. I don't need it. I'm fine without the parchment. Take it from me. The mysterious stranger takes the parchment and disappears. The scholar turns back to his students, as I was saying, and he goes to continue his class, and boom, forgets what he was saying. And not only he forgot what he's saying, he forgot everything. Forgot everything. It's like he never learned in his life. Boom, it's all gone. All gone. Around the same time, there's a rich man sitting in his parlor of his mansion, smoking a pipe, relaxing. He's a man of leisure. He doesn't have to work every day. He has investments all over the country that make money for him when he sleeps. Sitting, smoking his pipe, relaxing. There's a knock at the door. The butler goes and answers the door, and there's a mysterious stranger at the door. The mysterious stranger says, I'm raising funds to marry off my daughter. I need 100 ruble. And the butler says to the guy, our policy here is that we give to all the schnorrers, all the beggars here, they get 1 ruble. No, but I need 100. That's how much I need. Well, you're getting 1. And the mysterious stranger barges in past the butler, and he goes to the balabos, to the owner of the house, and he says to him, I need 100 ruble, fast. The rich guy says, you heard my butler. You get 1. The mysterious stranger says, you know what? Not so long ago, you were like me. You were also poor. And then you got that coin, and it made you rich. And the guy says, the coin is a joke. The coin didn't make me rich. I became rich because I'm good at business. It was my acumen and my skill that made me rich. The mysterious stranger says, then give me the coin. The rich guy says, fine, take the coin here, and that's all you're getting from me. A mysterious stranger takes the coin, he disappears. And a minute later, a messenger runs in. He says to the rich guy, the warehouse just burnt down and you were uninsured. Another messenger runs in. A whole shipment of merchandise that was uninsured just sank in the ocean. And then another piece of news and another piece of news. And within 20 minutes, he was wiped out. Completely wiped out. He lost everything. Okay. Around the same time, there's a married guy, and he's at home with his wife. And his wife says to him, "Oh, look outside." See, they lived in a little house outside of town with his mother-in-law, who was a widow. So they lived in a little house outside of town. And the wife's looking at the window. She says to her husband, "Oh, look, there's a guest. We don't really have guests very often, where we live outside of town. Look, there's a guest coming. Let's do the mitzvah of hachnosas orchim, hospitality to guests." She says to the husband, she says, "Go prepare the sheep." They had one little sheep, which they would shear for wool and sell some of the milk as well. They made a living from the little sheep. So she says, "Go prepare the sheep." That means slaughter the sheep and roast it, and we'll serve it to our guest. So he says, "Okay, no problem. Yes, dear." And he runs out, and he goes and he grabs the sheep, and he's getting ready to slaughter the sheep. And the guest appears and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I am preparing this sheep for you as our guest." He says, "Well, that's very, very generous, but that seems like very extravagant." And the guy says, No, it's not extravagant. We like to take care of our guests." And the mysterious stranger says, "Yeah, but still, I mean, like you could have given me, some beans, and I would have been satisfied. You're gonna slaughter this sheep." The guy says, "Okay, all right. You want me to be honest? I'll tell you. My wife told me to do it. Okay." And the mysterious stranger says to the guy, "Okay, your wife told you to do it. Do you listen to everything your wife tells you?" And the guy says, Yeah, I do. I listen to whatever she tells me." And the mysterious stranger says, "Oh, that's very good. In that case, here is this parchment, and here is this coin, and you should continue to be happily married to your wife for many long years." Okay, that's the little story. That's our parable. And now I'm going to ask you a question. That story never happened. Okay, it's made up. That's what I told you. It's a parable. Since it's made up, so then, technically it could have been made up differently. There's an expression, "Auf a Meise fragt man nit kin Kashes." You can't ask why a story happened the way that it happened. But that's only talking about a real story. Because if something happened, well, why did it happen that way? I don't know. That's the way that it happened. Like, just telling you what happened. But a made-up story, you could ask, well, why did it happen that way? In other words, could we have rewritten the story? Basically, what happened in the story, there were three guys. They all were sad, and they all needed something. mysterious stranger appears and solves all of their problems, but on a condition that they be generous to others in the area that they needed help in. The first two guys didn't keep their promise and they lost their blessing. And the third guy kept his promise and he kept his blessing, and plus he got the other two blessings that the first two guys lost. So here's my question. Could the first guy have ended up being the one who got all three blessings and the other two lost? Right? The first guy, the guy who didn't know how to learn and then he could. Or maybe we can change it to the second guy, the guy who was poor and then he became rich. Maybe he would keep the promise and he would get all the blessings in the end. Why does the story have to be the way that I told it to you, which is the way that I heard it and the way that it's been told for generations? Why is it the first two guys lost out and the third guy was the guy who won? And the answer is that it has to be the third guy. It can't be the first two guys. There's a reason why the third guy is the guy who ended up with all the blessings. But in order to understand that answer, I have to tell you something else first. Here's what I'll tell you. You have to know how a blessing works. We cannot generate blessings. Blessings come from on high. Blessings rain down upon us. All we can do is catch the blessing. We can hold out a cup to receive the blessing when it comes. In order to receive a blessing, you have to be humble. Because a cup that's full cannot receive. A cup that's full cannot receive. I'll tell you a story. There was once a guy who came to the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab was the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the last Rebbe in the actual town of Lubavitch. And one time, a guy was standing in front of the Rebbe Rashab's room, crying. The Rebbe Rashab had an older brother who did not become Rebbe. So the older brother, his name was Reb Zalman Aaron, walks by and he sees a guy crying in front of his brother's office. So he asks the guy, "Why are you crying?" So the guy says, "I was just inside with the Rebbe," meaning with the Rebbe, he's telling this to the Rebbe's brother. And I asked him for a bracha, for a blessing about something very important. And he told me, "Ich kann dir nicht helfen, I can't help you." So now I'm in trouble. Now I thought he was going to take care of me, and then he told me, "No, I can't help you. Now I'm totally broken. I'm standing out here crying." So the Rebbe's brother said, "Don't worry." He knocks on the door. He barges in. He says to his brother, he says, "This is how you do business over here? There's a guy outside crying." So the Rebbe Rashab says, "Send him in." So the guy comes back in. The Rebbe Rashab gave him a blessing, and the blessing came to fruition. That's the story. Now, the Rebbe told this story and asked a couple questions. First of all, why did the Rebbe Rashab say he couldn't help the guy? 10 minutes later, he did help him, so apparently he could have. And if he couldn't have helped him, what changed in 10 minutes that now he was able to help him? And another question, even if he couldn't help him at the time, why did he just tell him so bluntly, "I can't help you"? Could have comforted him, could have tried to, you could always give somebody encouragement. Don't just tell him, "I can't help you." So the Rebbe explains like this. In order for a blessing to take hold, we need to be receptive. We need to be a vessel. That means we need to empty ourselves. And when we're empty, emotionally empty means humble. then we can receive. So when we're full of ourselves, full of self-reliance, then there's no room for Hashem's blessing to enter. But when we're empty, when we're humble, when we feel like we have nothing, we can't do this on our own, and we need help. We can't rely on ourselves alone. So then, in that emptiness, the blessing can come down and we can receive it. Apparently, in this story, when the guy came to the Rebbe and he said, give me a blessing, the Rebbe looked at the guy and realized, I can't help you. You know why? Because he saw the guy is not humble. He's not receptive. So that's like saying, pour coffee into my cup. Well, your cup is full already. I can't pour anything into it if it's full already. So he told him the truth. I can't help you. That means that even if I would give you a blessing now, you wouldn't be able to receive it. Right? It's like pour the drink into my cup. Well, I could pour it in, but it's not going to go in because your cup's already full. So the guy came in, he was full of himself. And so the Rebbe Rashab told him the truth. I can't bless you. Then the guy goes out into the waiting room and he's crying. And the Rebbe's brother sees him crying and says, what's wrong? I just got turned down. The Rebbe told me, I can't help you. So then the Rebbe's brother goes back in and tells his brother, the Rebbe says, hey, there's a guy standing out there and he's a mess. He's totally broken. The Rebbe hears that. Oh, he's broken? Perfect. We can work with a guy like that. Send him back in. He came in broken, humble, not self-reliant, the opposite of self-reliant. And in that state of humility, then the Rebbe could bring down a bracha, and the guy was able to receive it. Those are the mechanics of blessing. Somebody who's full of himself, somebody who's self-reliant, there's no room for him to receive anything. A person who's arrogant, you can't tell them anything, right? They can't hear anything new. You can't tell them anything because they won't listen, right? A humble person can learn something new. Humility is teachability. Well, the same thing with blessings. An arrogant person can't receive a blessing. Just like an arrogant person can't receive new information, an arrogant person can't receive blessing because they're full of themselves. There's no room for the new blessings to go. So humility is the key to blessing. Now, here's the catch. When we don't have something, usually speaking, it humbles us. And then when we get it, there's something very dangerous that happens. We're in danger of losing the humility which allowed us to receive the blessing in the first place. So because I was humble, I was able to receive the blessing. But then I received the blessing and I started to think, oh, it's not a blessing. It's really, I earned it. I did this. And I forget about the fact it's a blessing. And I start thinking, I accomplished it on my own. And then I become the opposite of humble. I become arrogant. And then what happens? I lose the blessing because once I'm full of myself, there's no room for the blessing. A full cup cannot receive. So that's the occupational hazard of every blessing, that when you receive the blessing, it could actually cause you to lose the blessing. You hear what I'm saying? That is the paradox and the risk of every blessing. That when you receive the blessing, now you're okay. Oh, now I have what I wanted. Now I feel good. Oh, but then you start feeling cocky, start feeling arrogant, start feeling, I did this. And the problem is not just that arrogance is not a nice quality. Arrogance is what causes us to lose our blessings. And again, I want you to understand, I want to make sure this is very, very clear. I don't mean like tit for tat, like God punishes you. Oh, you're being arrogant? Okay, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to take away your blessings. No. It's just pure cause and effect. It's pure cause and effect. When you're empty, that means humble. So when Hashem puts blessings in your life, you're able to receive them because you have room, because you're making space within yourself. You're not all full of self. But when you're full of self, the blessings have no place to enter. And imagine if you were humble, so the blessing had a place in your heart and in your life, but then you stop being humble. Well, then what happens? Imagine imagine a bathtub that's full of, I don't know, ping pong balls. It was empty and you filled it with ping pong balls. But then what happened? You filled it up with water. And one by one, the ping pong balls start overflowing and spilling over the side of the bathtub until finally the whole bathtub's full of water and there's no more ping pong balls. So imagine the ping pong balls are the blessing and the water is the ego. So when you were empty of ego, you had all the blessing, but then you started filling up with ego more and more until one by one the blessings started leaving. So that's the occupational hazard, and that's the risk of every single blessing, is that when you're going to get blessed and you're going to feel the success in your life, you're going to think, I did it. You're going to forget that it was a blessing, that it came down to you. And then that self-reliance is going to actually cause you to lose your blessings. And that is a risk with every blessing. A person who becomes rich can become very arrogant about being rich. And you're going to say, well, I saw a lot of arrogant rich people. They didn't lose their blessing. They didn't lose their money. Those are two different things. Sometimes they keep their money, but they lose their blessing. They keep their money, and their money's a curse. I know plenty of rich people whose money is a curse. I'm telling you, if I didn't have to fundraise, I wouldn't be exposed to wealthy people. But I do have to fundraise, so I am exposed to wealthy people. And I want to tell you, among wealthy people, you can definitely see there are some people for whom their money is a blessing, like their money actually makes them have a better life because they have more opportunities and they're able to do more for others. And then there are other wealthy people, like plenty of them actually. I might even say the majority of wealthy people, for whom their money is clearly a curse. Their life would be much, much better without that money. It's a curse to them. It's clearly not a blessing. And the same thing with smarts. Okay, so you don't have people who were stupid and became smart, right? That's not how it works. You can have someone who was poor and became rich. Generally speaking, you don't have somebody who wasn't smart and became smart. So usually they're smart their whole life. But you can definitely see that being smart can be a curse. Many, many smart people. Again, I've met plenty of people who are very, very, very smart, and their intelligence is a curse. It doesn't make their life better. They would be much happier, and their lives would be better if you could knock 20 IQ points off of them. So definitely, there's a risk that any blessing can become a curse. So let's talk about our story. There was a guy who couldn't learn, and he was broken over the fact that he couldn't learn. And he received this blessing. He got the aleph-based parchment, and it opened his eyes, and he was able to study. But then he became arrogant. He became self-reliant. He thought it was his skill that made him successful in his studies. And as soon as he became self-reliant, he lost his blessing. And then there's the story about the poor man. He became rich. That was a blessing. That coin that he was given. From that moment, he was magnetic with money. That was a blessing. But he didn't remember that it was a blessing. He started thinking that he did it. It was his acumen. And when he became self-reliant, he thought it was all about him. What happened? He lost his blessing. And then guy number three. What was the deal with guy number three? And remember, I asked you, maybe we could have changed the story that guy number one could have been the one who stayed humble and kept all the blessings. Or guy number two could have stayed humble and kept all the blessings. Why do we make it that guy number three was the one who stayed humble and kept all the blessings? So I'll answer that question. And the answer is that the risk of every blessing is that when you have that blessing, you start to become arrogant and you start to think you're so great. And then when you start thinking you're so great and you lose your blessings, that's the risk of all blessings, except for one blessing. There's one blessing that the more blessed you are, the more humble you become as well. Or maybe I could put it like this. There's one blessing that will keep you humble. And that is the blessing of marriage. So the guy became rich. Some people are humbled by their wealth, but it's hard. You got to really work at that. Second story, the guy became smart. Some people are humbled by their own intelligence, but again, it takes a great deal of sensitivity. You really have to work at it. But marriage, anybody who's actually successful at marriage will never be arrogant about it, because the only way to be successful at marriage is by being humble. And the more successful you are at marriage, the more humble you are, and the more humble you become, because the entire key to marriage is humility. Or like I started off saying, the study at UCLA, where they looked at couples and they saw what is the one common ingredient amongst all successfully long-term married couples who are happy in their marriage. It is the value of, remember what I said, the one value that they all had? Sacrifice. So it's not about communication, it's not about compatibility, it's not about shared values and that they share the same level of religiosity, or they share the same hobbies, or there's physical attraction, or they have the same sleep schedule, I'm sure all those things are good. But the one factor that determines more than any other that a marriage is going to be successful and that the people are going to be happy is the value for sacrifice. And until we get that, it is pointless to discuss anything else. Pointless. And yet, people want to skip that part. They want to go talk about, how can we communicate better, or, how can we spend more quality time together, or how do we get to know each other better? All those things are great. I'm not saying that they don't do anything. I'm saying if you don't have the foundation of sacrifice, then yeah, those things are pointless. They really don't do anything. Because marriage is not a human endeavor. Marriage is bigger than anything that a human being can accomplish, and it's bigger than anything that two human beings can accomplish. Marriage is so big, so impossible, the joining together of two souls, that the only way for it to happen successfully is with a power greater than ourselves. And that means we need blessing. It's not enough to be smart. It's not enough to be committed. It's not enough to be willing to work hard. All those things are important, yes, but the first foundation is selflessness, humility, sacrifice. Okay, those are all synonymous. Those all mean the same thing. Selfless, humble, and ready to sacrifice. Those are all the same idea. We need to think, what am I ready to give up? What am I ready to give up for peace in the home? Whatever it is I'm not willing to give up for peace in the home, I have to admit I value more than peace in the home. Now, I want to make something very, very clear, that when I'm talking about giving up things that are important to me for the sake of peace in the home, that is very, very different than giving up things for another person. And it sounds like a semantic difference, but I assure you that it's a very practical difference, and the difference is night and day. We make sacrifices for the sake of peace, which is another way of saying sacrifices for God, because peace in the home is the presence of the Shekhinah, Hashem's presence in the home. So the sacrifice is for a power greater than both of us. We make sacrifices for God, so that God can be in the home. That is very different than making sacrifices for a person. We don't make sacrifices for a person, not even for our spouse. In fact, do you know the word for making sacrifices to anyone or anything other than God? It's a harsh word. It's called idol worship. Making a sacrifice for anyone or anything other than God is called idol worship. And one of the things about idol worship is not only is it prohibited, but it doesn't work, because the idol can never take care of you the way it promises to. When we make sacrifices for a person, what does that mean? That means we compromise our values in the hopes that a person will give us approval. Well, like any idol, it's going to leave you disappointed, because in the end, it can't do what it promises it can do. When we make compromises of our values and our principles in order to get somebody else to tell us we're okay, it always ends up driving us apart instead of bringing us together. It's codependent shtick. Being a people pleaser, being addicted to the drug called approval. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't bring closeness. So we don't make sacrifices for a person. No. We make sacrifices for Hashem. There's a big difference. I'm not asking, what can I give to this person so that they will approve of me? God forbid. What I'm asking is, what can I give up for the sake of peace in the home, for the sake of God being at home in the home? So I'm not compromising my values. This is my value. That's my highest value. My highest value is that God should be present in the home. And God is present when there is peace. So if we will be sacrificing and selfless and humble with the intention of allowing God to be present in the home, then we will see that we are blessed and that there's a power greater than ourselves working in our lives and in our marriage. But if we don't want that, if we want to do it ourselves and do it with human power, and therefore not have to sacrifice ourselves and not be humble, not be selfless, you can do it that way also. And for some people, it works better than others. But even in the best case scenario, you're still dealing with finite power. How well can it actually work? At a certain point, finite power is not enough to accomplish an infinite task like a marriage. A marriage is an infinite task. And therefore, this is something that everyone can learn for themselves. In other words, try it and see. Try to run your marriage based on self-will. Try to run your marriage based on human power. See how far you get. See if you keep running up against the same obstacles. And when you see that you do, and you're tired of that, and then you become tired of being tired, and you're ready to be reasonable, then go back to the sacrifice that we were avoiding from the beginning and realize this is the only way that it really can work. In other words, let me put it a little bit differently. And then, as usual, I'll take questions. People can post in the chat. You can chat me privately. The best thing is to chat me privately. I'm going to chat to everyone, but the best thing is you should chat me privately. I'll put it like this. You know how people make jokes about marriage? You know that, right? People make fun of marriage all the time. If you're a public speaker and you want an easy laugh from a crowd, make a joke about marriage, and people will always laugh because it's just like a thing. Everyone accepts that we all hate being married and it's awful, and therefore you're allowed to make fun of it, right? So one thing you're allowed to make fun of and everyone will laugh, right? You never realized that? It's the one thing in any setting, the one topic you're allowed to make jokes about and everyone will laugh and no one will be offended is marriage. It's very funny. I mean, funny, like weird. You ever notice that? Maybe you didn't, because I noticed it, because I have to go give speeches, and when you give speeches, you have to tell jokes so people fall asleep. So it's always difficult to know what can you make jokes about, because there's topics that people get offended. You can't make jokes about them, right? So you can't make a joke that'll offend people, then you lose half your audience, then you don't get them back. What topic can you always joke about and people always laugh? Marriage. Now, I don't do it. I don't do it because I feel like, for all the reasons that I've been speaking about, we shouldn't be making fun of marriage. But I'm just pointing out to you that marriage is the one thing everybody feels like it's fair game to mock and deride and say whatever you want about it. So let me tell you like this. The reason that people, should I say a strong sentence, that people resent marriage? Yeah. The reason that so many people resent marriage is because intuitively they understand what it really requires. It requires self-sacrifice. And people don't want that. And they want to try to be happily married without that. And it doesn't work. So they get mad at marriage for demanding too much. But here's what I want to explain. Anything that is as humongous as marriage is not something that you can accomplish on your own. And if you want to just remain an entity unto yourself, remain a yesh, a being, an ego, you're not going to be able to do it. The only way to do it is what we call bittul. Bittul, selfification. So if you want to be happily married, you have to have bittul. And conversely, if you want to have bittul, go become married. It'll help you. It'll help you a lot with your bittul. I have a question here. What's wrong with being selfless, giving up stuff not for approval, but just because you love your spouse and value his needs and want to show him, in addition to sacrificing for the sake of Hashem's presence, as you've taught us? Okay, so I said when you make a sacrifice to a human being, it's not okay. And the example I gave is to get their approval. So you're saying, well, what if I'm not doing it for approval? What if I'm doing it just because I want to show him that I love him? So I'm going to say something that's going to sound very harsh. And it is harsh, but it's reality. Why are you showing love to anyone but Hashem? I know, it sounds very harsh. I'm not telling you not to love your husband. I'm saying, why are you showing love to anyone but Hashem? Here's the difference. You can love your husband in a way that is showing love to Hashem. Or you can do it just because you want to love your husband. You can do it because on a human level, you want to love your husband. Okay, fine. Guess it's not the thing you want to do, right? It's better than robbing a bank. But wouldn't it be so much more pure if your love for your husband was a way of expressing your love for Hashem? It's like children, by the way, same thing. You can love your children because you love them, because they're cute, because they give you nachas, because whatever. Or you can say, hold on, no, that's a human thing. I want to be superhuman. I can love my children because I have a mitzvah. I have a mitzvah to take care of these children. Hashem gave me these children to take care of. And therefore, in order to do my mitzvah of raising them, I have to love them. And by loving them, I'm doing a mitzvah. The same thing with loving a spouse. By loving your spouse and increasing the closeness with your spouse, you're bringing the Shekhinah more into the home. Really, who are you doing a favor to? To Hashem, because you're showing love to Hashem. As long as the intention is for Hashem. So I gave the example of trying to get approval from people, so you agree with me for sure that's dysfunctional. What I'm saying is your example is a, obviously a much level. It's not like trying to get approval from somebody, but there's a higher level even than what you're talking about, and that is love him not because you love him, but because being close with him is a way of serving God. Just like keeping Shabbos is a way of serving God. Just like putting on tefillin is a way of serving God. Like eating kosher is a way of serving God. Well, being close with your spouse is a way of serving God. Anything else? I have another question in the private chat asking me to summarize last week's class. If I could summarize it, it took me an hour last week. You think I can summarize it? I don't know. It was about parenting. Be good to your kids. Took an hour and a half. Let me just tell everybody something, okay? Since you're all online right now, go to soulwords.org. We just relaunched my soulwords.org. Spent a lot of time and money making it beautiful, making it easy to use. So I want to show you something. If you go to the site, I want to ask everybody, go to the site and tell your friends to go, all of your friends to the site. I'm going to give you a link here. The second link I gave you is just to videos, classes, speeches about education. So anything about parenting is all there. And hold on a second. Wow, look at this. This is a great site. Here's another link. Anything about relationships, marriage, whatever, that's all there. You see that? Just give you 3 links to the homepage, and then the next link is all about and parenting and education, and next link is all marriage and relationship stuff. Go check it out. Tell your friends to check it out. What else? Quiet in the chat. Anything else? Okay, good. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in, so I'm assuming everybody figured everything out. Or you're so confused from what I spoke about you. I don't know. I don't even know what that guy said.
All our relationships are perfect.
Alrighty. Thanks. Can I give more examples? Somebody just give me an example. I just spoke for an hour. I'm tired. You give me an example. I'm serious. I just for an hour. Tell me an example. Tell me a personal example. You privately chatting. Nobody knows who you are. Give me an example of how you could show selflessness to allow more peace and more God into your home. You typing? I can't tell if you're typing. Type an example and I'll tell you if I think it's a good one. Is it enough? This is another one. Is it enough to show love to your husband based on the fact that it's for Hashem? What do you mean, is it enough? I just said that's everything. What do you mean, is it enough? What do you mean, is it enough? That's everything. That's everything. I think maybe what you're asking is, you don't really love him, but Hashem says that you should be close to your spouse, so you're going to pretend. That's not what we're saying. When you realize that this is your mitzvah, marriage is your mitzvah. Just like when you're putting on tefillin. Tefillin is a mitzvah. But in order on tefillin, you need the tefillin. Okay? Or the light Shabbos candles. You need the Shabbos candles. So to be married, you need your spouse. And not just any spouse, because this is yours. This is your bashert, personally picked for you, to refine you and to elevate you. So if you love the mitzvah, of course you love your spouse. Because without your spouse, you couldn't do this mitzvah and you couldn't have connection to Hashem. And when you realize that your spouse is your connection, the only way that you can do this mitzvah, then of course you're going to genuinely love your spouse. Is it enough if only one spouse is showing selflessness? It's not enough. It'll work. It's very sad when that's the situation. Very sad. But it'll work. And you can have a home that is healthy. And what do I mean a home that's healthy? You know, it's hard to say this. It's very hard to say this, but and I'm not saying there are not exceptions, because there are exceptions, but when the children grow up feeling secure and stable, that means the house was healthy. If you have one selfless spouse, that's enough to create an environment that children will feel insecure. Now, I also have to mention a caveat, which is if you're being selfless already, and even with your selflessness, you are unsafe because your spouse is behaving abusively. And I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about what's abusive. If you have questions, ask your Rav, ask a therapist, ask both of them, and then share each one's answers with the other. But if you have a spouse who, even when you're acting completely selflessly, is behaving abusively, then even with all your selflessness, it's not going to really make a healthy, safe, secure environment. And then selflessness is not enough. But if you're just dealing with a situation and one spouse embraces self-sacrifice and the other doesn't, well, it may be a lonely way to live, but it is for the purposes of creating a healthy home. And in many cases, that's the decision that people make, even though it can be very lonely, but it can also be successful in the sense of creating a home that's safe and secure for yourself, for your spouse, for your children. Obviously, the ideal is that both spouses are both going to be selfless. And that's why I talk about this topic, hoping that as many people as possible will embrace this way of life. What about when it's about religious values? Yeah, especially it's about religious values. You can be as frum as you want on your own cheshbon. But I'll tell you something. It says about the Ben Seder Omeira. It says, V'yu le'ish Ben Seder Omeira inene shamea el kol imay. There's a stubborn, rebellious son who won't listen to the voice of his mother or the voice of his father. Why doesn't it just say, we know Torah always says things in the most efficient way. Why doesn't it just say he won't listen to his parents' voice? Why does it say he won't listen to the voice of his father and the voice of his mother? But the hint is that later, when they bring the stubborn, rebellious son to the rabbis to complain about him, they say, "B'neinu zeh einenu shamea koleinu." This son of ours doesn't listen to our voice. When they go to the rabbi, the parents claim that the son doesn't listen to our voice. But the Torah already told us there is no our voice. There's a voice of them, there's a voice of the mother. Kol aviv v'kol imay. They claim to have a unified voice. Truth, Torah already told us they don't. And therefore they have a stubborn, rebellious son. The worst thing you can do for the children is to be inconsistent. So I will say like this, it is better to have a lower religious standard that you and your spouse will both be able to back up and keep than to have a higher religious standard that you and your spouse are not going to be on the same page about. And just a practical thing, it's a religious thing, because you want to know, you want to be so frum, you want to be so religious. This is religious. This is religious. Making sure you have standards for the children that your spouse and you can agree upon, that is the way of serving Hashem. Now, if it's something that's just for you and it only affects you, you can be as frum as you want to be. But if you want to be religious, not fake religious, then it's better to have a lower standard that you're both going to enforce and believe in equally than to have a higher standard that is causing friction. Question is, does it always have to be focused on that? On what? On self-sacrifice? Yes. Yeah, it's all self-sacrifice. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I think this is a clarification religious values question. So I think I answered that. Do both need to be selfless in order to bring peace? No, I said it. You could do it with one side being selfless. Obviously, it's much better of both. Okay. A mother grew up in an abusive home and her husband is fed up with her controlling her kids and him. Okay. A mother grew up in an abusive home and her husband is fed up with her controlling her kids and him. What should he do? He overcompensates for her routine. Oh, so you have a husband and a wife. The wife grew up in an abusive home and she is controlling the children and she's controlling him. And he's fed up with her rigidity. Well, you could always get divorced, so that option is there. I just want to make sure right from the beginning you realize nobody's holding a gun to your head and leave. But if you want to stay married and you want to try to make it work, you married a woman who comes from an abusive home. That's her background. That's part of what makes her who she is. She has scars which cause her to be a rigid, controlling wife and mother. You can fight her on that, or you can try to reflect that. It is possible that if you will try to understand her deeply, and this is very, very, I mean, I'll go back to what I said at first. You can get divorced if you want to. Okay? Nobody's forcing you to do this. But if you want to stay married and you want to, it's very, very hard. But you can be such a reliable, selfless, loving best friend that maybe, just maybe, your wife, who comes from the traumatic home, will be able to grow and change and learn to let go a little bit and learn from your softness and learn from your warmth. She married you for a reason. She became rigid as a defense mechanism because of her abuse. She had to become rigid to survive. She married you for a reason, and maybe it's the softness from you. But in order for her to feel safe to do that, you have to help her to feel safe. And that means no judgment. Don't judge her. She has hers just like you have your story. Be compassionate. Make it safe for her to look into herself and start questioning the way that she is. It may take 20 years. If you don't have 20 years, I told you from the beginning you could get divorced. But if you're ready to spend 20 years with the patience of a saint, making her feel honored and safe, then maybe she can lighten up a little bit and learn softness from you. Question. The opposite. You do love him, but in the back of your mind, you say Hashem. Oh, the opposite problem? You got to work on it. You got to think about Hashem more often. You got to meditate. When you say your brachas in the morning, spend an extra 5 minutes saying brachas and think about all the things you're thanking Hashem for. Does God want God in the home, or does God want peace, which will in turn bring God? Oh, that's a deep question. I love that. That's like a Gemara cup question. That's. God wants to be in the home. God wants to be in the home. But in order for the home, there has to be peace. Peace is what allows God to be in the home. Or tell us that there's no kli, there's no vessel for blessing like shalom, like peace. So peace is the vessel that allows God to be in the home. But it's a virtuous cycle, because once there's peace, then there's God, and once there's God, there's more peace. How to be selfless when it is anger in the spouse that is a problem. If the spouse shouts a lot, then it teaches the children it's okay. Then they're shouting. Yeah, that's tough. People shout when they don't think they're being heard. Now, it's not an excuse for shouting. Shouting is wrong. The question is, if there's anything that a spouse could do for a spouse with anger, to let them know that their anger is unnecessary, and that whatever it is that they think they're accomplishing through the anger, they're not. Now, this could be just a crazy person. You could be married to a crazy person who's deeply angry and never going to grow up. And, okay, like I said to the person before, you could always get divorced. But let's say this is a person who is normal. And I define normal as anyone who is willing to work on themselves. Person could be really messed up, and they're still normal because they're willing to work on themselves. You understand what I'm saying? Doesn't matter how messed up you are. As long as you're willing to work on yourself, you're okay. So if this person is willing to be humble, willing to work on themselves, and willing to, that this is a journey, and to own up to it, say, yes, I do have anger issues, then you can work with such a person. And you can help them to find within themselves the strength not to use shouting as a way of making themselves basically people scream because it makes them feel safe. I'm going to have a whole discussion about that. Okay. Anyways, if this is a normal person, a person who's humble and can admit they have a problem, you can work with them and learn to be better. And by the way, you're talking about what the children are going to learn from them. You know what the children are going to learn? The children are going to learn the most powerful lesson in the world, which is that people can change. So if they grew up knowing their father had a problem shouting, but then he stopped, or he started doing it less, that's the most powerful gift you can give them. How far should one sacrifice for the peace? Is physical comfort overdoing it? I don't mean extreme discomfort, rather things like going on a walk when tired, wearing high heels, etc. Are those two different things, or like going on a walk in high heels? So I have a very strong opinion about the way a woman dresses. I'm of a very, very strong opinion that that's nobody's business but a woman. And I don't know where all these perverts got the idea. Yeah, I know. All the frum guys hate me when I say this. So from why do you think your wife is putting on a fashion show for you? Grow up. Okay. I know this will hate me when I say that. But whatever. Sorry. But regarding other things, like going on a walk when tired, meaning your husband wants to go, I'm assuming you're a woman because you're talking about wearing the high heels, okay? But unless it's a man who wants the heels, then we have a different discussion. Anyways, you're saying going on a walk when tired. Your husband, let's go on a walk. And you're, I totally don't want to go on a walk right now. Yeah, so you know what my answer to you is? Your husband asked you to spend time with you. Do it. Do it, even if it makes you physically uncomfortable. Yes, totally do it. It's worth it. It's worth it. The peace that will bring through the day, going on a walk with him. He just invited you. Let's take a walk. Do it, do it, do it. Even if it exhausts you, it's so worth the investment. Okay. By the way, you're going to see the husbands are going to be mad at me that I told the wife to sacrifice her comfort to go on a walk with her husband, but I said, don't worry how you dress however the heck you want to dress. Right? And you're going to see which husbands are going to find my email and they're going to contact me and say, you told my wife to rebel against me. No, I told your wife to go on a walk with you when you invite her. Okay, but no, you don't care about it. You don't want to walk with her. You want her to dress up for you. And if that's the case, go buy the dirty magazines, okay? Because that's what you're trying to turn your wife into. Yes, I said it. I said it and I meant it. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, this is being recorded? Fantastic. All right. So you know what's going to be on everyone's WhatsApp tomorrow. Okay. Well, look, I mean it, and I mean it passionately. And I spent years not saying it because I felt like, A, maybe it was an inappropriate thing, and I shouldn't even bring it up because why give people ideas if they don't have these ideas? B, people hate hearing it, so why say something that people hate? But I got to tell you something. It's ruining marriages. It's ruining marriages, and it's killing children. And I can't stand here. So many families who are spiritually, the house is in flames because the man was never taught how to be a mensch. Anyways, that probably isn't what your question is. And your husband probably is a very sensitive and loving husband. And you mentioned a key word that reminded me of something that happens in other marriages. I'm sure that's not, I'm serious. I'm sure that's not your issue and that's not happening in your marriage. But for those who it is, it's out of hand. And especially in the religious circles, like, guys, come on. Come on. It's like, why in the religious world do we have more of an issue with this? It's absurd. It's absurd. Oh, it is like probably my biggest pet peeve. Just because it's like there's no reason for it. Like, who's teaching young men how to be husbands? You have these guys who are sitting in kollel all day, who ostensibly are such tzaddikim, and they're coming to me and they're complaining about that their wife isn't. It's like, please, please, please. And I promise you right now, I'm going to get 10 emails tonight from husbands telling me that I'm destroying bias, right? I'm destroying your shalom bias because you're objectifying your wife and trying to use her like okay, yeah, I'm destroying your shalom bias because that's how you're using your wife. Anyway. Let's do a few more. Let's do a few more here. Selfless means giving in the whole time and being a shmata. It's not called being a shmata. It's called being. Let me ask you a question. When Rabbi Akiva got his skin combed off until he died, was he a shmata? Mesiras nefesh doesn't make you a shmata. Self-sacrifice doesn't make you a shmata. It makes you a hero. The only way it could possibly be wrong is if you're sacrificing yourself to something that isn't worthy of your sacrifice. So if you sacrifice yourself to make another human being out of you, then that's a terrible thing to sacrifice yourself for. But if you're sacrificing yourself so that God can be in the home, then you're like Rabbi Akiva. You're a martyr. You're Um, by saying that a marriage's success rides primarily on willingness to sacrifice and separating that from love, does that mean that love is not an essential ingredient into marriage to make it work? I think I answered sufficiently. Whoever asked that question, I think I answered that sufficiently. Did I not? What does everybody else say? What are the other 50 people on the? I'll reiterate it if you so desire. Love alone is not enough. Communication alone is not enough. Shared values is not enough. Without the foundation of self-sacrifice, nothing else will be enough. Now, if you have the sacrifice, then everything else is wonderful. Okay. What if the person doesn't agree they were abused as a child and is doing it to their kids? Well, it's a big problem. That's a big problem. Like I told you, the definition of normal is not somebody who doesn't have problems, because everyone has problems. Do you know that? There's two kinds of people in the world. Normal people and people that you really know. You know what that means? Everyone's messed up. That's why everyone wants to do a shidduch with the family they never met, because they think that family's normal. Then you realize they're as crazy as your neighbors. And then you find out your neighbors are as crazy as your family. Everyone's up. The only thing that makes people normal is that they admit that they're messed up and they're willing to work on it. So the person who's like, no, I'm fine. Oh, no, I have no issues from childhood. That's the psychopath. Stay away from him. Okay? But the person's like, yeah, I have my issues. I need to work on it. So they're going to be okay. Somebody who was abused and they don't admit they were abused, I don't know. I mean, you have to be very gentle, because somebody who doesn't admit that they were abused, there's one of two possibilities. Either they weren't abused and you're the you got a problem. You know, you decided that your share and Schwiger are abusers, right? Or the other alternative is that they were abused, but it's too traumatic for them to even admit that they. So you have to be sensitive to that. But if there's a lot of understanding and a lot of empathy and no judgment, that it is possible in a loving relationship with a spouse that the spouse who has issues from the abuse would be able to come to terms with it and work on it. What if a woman lost her husband? Can God still be in the home? Wow. So you know that, a marriage is a unique thing. It's a unique way of bringing God into the home. Now, there are many ways that we bring God into the world. Every mitzvah you do brings God into the. Every mitzvah brings God into the world. But marriage is a very special way of bringing God into the world in a very specific context. So what I would say is there are many ways for someone who is widowed or someone who's single who never was married. There are many ways that they can bring God into the world. And you can even bring God into your home by doing mitzvahs in the home. But I would be lying to you to pretend that there's something you could do that would substitute that connection, for the connection to God that comes through the marriage. I would be lying to you to pretend that you can still have the same thing. But yes, you can still bring the Shekhinah into the world. Every mitzvah that you do a mitzvah in your home, you're bringing the Shekhinah into your home. It's not exactly the same way as through marriage, and you know it. But yes, you can still bring God into the world. Make sure that you have mezuzahs in the home. Make sure you have holy books in the home. That the kosher and it's an open home and hachnasas orchim and having guests and all the mitzvahs that you can do in a home with a home. Yes, you can have God in the home. Are you saying we don't need to be happily married? We should just sacrifice? Well, that's a willfully insipid question. I'm going to be like Trump. Trump's my president American. When Trump doesn't like the question at the press conference, he's like, well, that's a nasty question. That's a nasty question. Did I say anything of the sort? Did I say you don't need to be married, you just need to sacrifice? Was that what I said? Did I say that? That's a rhetorical question. How about this? I'll turn it on you. Go try to be happy without sacrifice. Go try. I invite you to try it. Go try to be happily married without sacrifice. And get back to me in 20 years. Tell me if it works. If it worked, then I'll be very happy for you because I'm happy if people are happy. But my expectations are that a person who tries to be happy and isn't willing to make sacrifice won't even be happy. So if you're trying to take the happiness over the sacrifice, in the end, you're not even going to have the happiness. But if you take the sacrifice over the happiness, in the end, you'll have the sacrifice and the happiness. Does that make sense? But maybe having their wife look nice helps them from looking elsewhere. Did a man write that question? Did a woman write that? I'm going to bet, I don't know, I'd have to have a few more words to guess. Having their wife look nice helps them from looking elsewhere. Not true. It's not true. It's not true. And you borrow my phone for a week and get back to me. Borrow my phone. I want to tell you something. I never got out my number and told anyone to call me. Contrary to what people think, I'm not a therapist. I'm not here to help you with your problems. I'm a rabbi. I teach Torah classes, and I write a column about Torah, which people psychology, and they think I'm a psychologist, and they should call me with their problems. I never ask people to call me with their problems. Okay? But people call me every day. How many calls do I get on a weekly basis? And I'm going to speak very, very grub for a moment. From women who have on every level offered their husbands everything that a husband could desire, and their husbands are not only looking elsewhere but far worse. And it's a plague in our community. A plague. And I'm sick of it. And to say that if the woman would have been more attractive, that the husband would have been able to control it, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. It's disgusting. It's abusive. And it is the rot that is at the core of some of the deepest dysfunction in our community right now. You're not going to look out there because of your relationship with Hashem. You guard your eyes because you're a man and your relationship with Hashem requires to guard your purity. Put on your wife that she didn't dress the way you needed to dress in order for you not to look where you're not supposed to look. And if she's not a good cook, that's your excuse for going to McDonald's? No, I reject it. I reject it. I'm getting more about this. Do whatever you want. Women should dress however they want. Dress however you want. I mean, let me add a caveat to that. Within the bounds of halacha. However you want within the bounds of halacha. Which is funny, by the way, because it's interesting. It's written from husbands who are trying to get their wives to bend halacha. It's like they wouldn't tell her to bend the halacha. That thing that's not really so kosher, could you put that in our food? They wouldn't ask that, right? Okay. Why am I being misunderstood about this? Someone saying, are you saying a woman cannot dress up to attract her husband? Or should a woman dress up in public and violate tznius values? I don't even understand that question. Is that a straw man question? What are you trying to say? I understand the question. What's the question? What are you asking me? She shouldn't dress up to attract her husband. She should dress up in a way to attract attention in public. When did I say that? Did I say anything that would suggest that? Women should dress however they want within the bounds of halacha. Men should stay out of it. It's very simple. Why is that a difficult concept? I'm happy for anyone who doesn't know the extent to which this is a problem. Happy for you if you don't realize. It is, yeah. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what else to tell you. All right. Any other confusion that needs to be sorted out? Anything else? You see why I don't talk about this? Because 53 people on the chat. One person out of 53 already understood me without me saying it. Then 10 people completely misunderstood me and are going to repeat to everybody that I said something weird that I didn't say. And then the other 40 were like, I don't know what he said. I saw him yelling, so probably it might have been interesting, but I didn't get it. So why did I talk about it? Because in the end, 10 people are going to go around saying I said I didn't say. So then what's the point? Why do I even talk about it? I don't know, because as a tudvei shreitman, because I'm in pain, so I talk about it. I mean, I usually don't talk about it, but it is very painful. Borrow my phone for a week. Borrow my phone for 1 week, and get the calls from the families who are going through hell because they don't understand to what extent they brought schmutz into their most intimate relationship, and they don't even realize it. The husband and wife relationship is Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's the holiest thing in the world. Okay, so to clarify, you say keep out of the wife's dress. And the woman you say dress however you want and should ignore the husband's requests. To clarify, I say the husband should be and don't worry about how your wife is dressed. To the wife I say, dress within halacha. The only criteria you have to conform to is between you and God. And as far as dressing for your husband, if you want to dress for him how you want, go ahead. I'm not stopping you. I'm not stopping you. If you, first of all, I can't stop you. But you dress however you want. My problem is when a woman feels My problem is when a woman feels that she's not enough on her own. My problem is when a woman doesn't feel worthy of her husband's respect or time or attention. And so you wonder why teenage girls feel they have to walk down the street and dress inappropriately to turn heads. Well, maybe they saw the same thing in their own home. Maybe they realized that if their mother didn't dress a say, their father wouldn't look at their mother. Think about that for a minute. So my problem is when a woman feels pressure to do it and feels that she can't get her husband's attention without. Now, if she feels validated, she feels they're close, she feels there's a real connection, and in that closeness, she wants to dress how she wants to dress for him, as long as she's within the bounds of halacha, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. Marriage is a combination of two individuals who bond together, and both should be on the lookout to cater to the other out of care. Yes, 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 yes. Both should be on the lookout, I like that, to cater for the other out of care. That's right. care of your spouse. Take care of them. Look out for them. Protect them. Nurture them. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I love that. All right. What else? Anything else? Anyway, listen, I want to bless out everyone, myself included, all of us, that we should just have a lot of peace in the home, a lot of good connectedness with our spouses, and we should give Hashem nachas. There's nothing gives Hashem nachas like peace between husband and wife. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
All right. I'm going to take off. See you later.
Thank you.